Okay, pictures per question. You know what I mean. 2 questions for the first picture. For that action potential picture. Only 2 questions for it. Four questions for the cerebral spinal fluid picture. Only 1 question for the eyeball. Although I will tell you this. I say only 1 question for that eyeball, and there is. That means there's only 1 question saying, what does number 7 point? It doesn't actually say that, but there's some other questions above it and below it that the picture will help you on, certainly. And then how many endocrine questions there are? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 endocrine questions. 5 of those endocrine questions. And then kidney is. I hope I didn't send that to the photocopiers with that little bad formatting here. 1, 2, 3. 3 questions for the kidney. Nephron. 3 questions for nephron. I think it's 10. All right. There are 100 questions. 100 questions, 1.5 points apiece. 100 questions, 1.5 points apiece.
What would you say, you know how in 203 you said that the final was like a little more general?
I'm about to go through it.
Oh, okay.
Yep, I'm about to go through it. So make sure you know the how to make sure you know how we classify different branches of the nervous system, like central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, motor nervous system, sensory nervous system. Sensory is also known as afferent, motor is also known as efferent. Remember in the chapter 11 or 12, whatever the first nervous system chapter is, remember I had a chart that had central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and peripheral nervous, and it went out, and you kept having more branches. Like you had the somatic motor and the autonomic motor and all that. I would look at that chart again. Make sure you know how we divide up the nervous system and talk about it. Like central or peripheral, like motor or sensory. Somatic motor, autonomic motor. Special senses, general senses. That whole big thing about how the nervous system works. Any questions about that? Make sure you know your glial cells. And even separate from that picture, make sure you know how we depolarize and repolarize. Now, obviously, there's a couple of exceptions to that. Like in the ear, you learned one of those exceptions, right? You even know what I'm talking about?
Where it hyperpolarizes?
No, in the ear, potassium actually entered the cell to depolarize it because the ear hair was sitting in the endolink, which was high in potassium. Don't worry about that anymore. I'm just saying that in general, how we depolarize, sodium rushes in. How do we repolarize? Potassium comes out. Because obviously you guys know enough now to know there's some exceptions. I'm talking about generalizations. You should know your 3-minute meningeal layers. All right, make sure you know some basic reflex terminology in physiology. When I say terminology, I mean like monosynaptic, polysynaptic, ipsilateral, contralateral. Stop me if you don't know these words. Go ahead.
Say it again.
So when I say some reflex terminology, I mean words like monosynaptic, polysynaptic,
Can you just explain?
Yeah, monosynaptic is there's no interneuron. The afferent neuron synapses with the efferent neuron, there's one synapse. Polysynaptic is there's at least one interneuron. The afferent neuron, sensory neuron synapses with the interneuron, that's one synapse. The interneuron synapses with the efferent motor neuron, second synapse, polysynaptic, and there could even be more. So monosynaptic versus polysynaptic. And then I said ipsilateral versus contralateral. What does contralateral mean? Crosses over. Not like genetic crossing over with the homologous chromosomes, but crossing over from one hemisphere to the other in the spinal cord. Make sure you absolutely know this, what the precentral gyrus does and the postcentral gyrus does. I know it's kind of detailed for a final, but I never got 100% of you to get that question right. The precentral gyrus is a primary motor area. The precentral is primary motor. Postcentral gyrus is primary somatosensory. I would love it if I printed out that sheet and it said 0 people missed this number. That's what I would love. Precentral gyrus, primary motor cortex. Postcentral gyrus, primary somatosensory. Make sure you know your types of fibers out of the brain. Remember the types of fibers? Projection fibers, commissural fibers, association fibers. Association fibers stay within a hemisphere. Commissural fibers cross from one hemisphere to another. And projection fibers go out of the brain into the spinal cord, or you could say you go from the spinal cord into the brain, depending which direction it's going. So projection fibers, commissural fibers, association fibers.
Association fibers stay in one half.
They stay in one hemisphere, yeah. They don't leave the hemisphere. There are long and short. I mean, so don't get me wrong, there's a long association fiber and a short association fiber, but they don't leave the hemisphere. All right, make sure you know in general what your lobes do. Know what your frontal lobe does, and your parietal lobe does, and your occipital lobe does, and your temporal lobe does. So if I said, where does the auditory senses go? Where do auditory signals go? Temporal lobe, right? Where do visual signals go? Occipital lobe. See, that's what I mean. Know what your lobes do. Okay, now in general, well, there's one. I would relearn. You're gonna have to learn all 12 to know the one I asked, or 2 I asked. You have to relearn your 12 cranial nerves. Now, I mean, I didn't ask any real nitty-gritty details about them, but sure enough, I have some cranial nerve questions.
Like whether they're, like what they do, where they go. Whether they're like motor or sensory,
Yeah,
all that.
like that. The names, the numbers, the motor sensory. Yeah, those mnemonics. Relook at those mnemonics you learned for the 12 cranial nerves. Okay, for the descending motor tracts, please do not memorize the fasciculi. Just like from before, you didn't have to. But you definitely have to know there's a pyramidal system and an extrapyramidal system. Remember that? The pyramidal system, you have the decussation of the pyramids and the medulla. The pyramidal system was the primarily voluntary, and the extrapyramidal was primarily involuntary. Remember all that? So look at your descending motor tracts again if you forgot all of that. And make sure you realize there's a pyramidal motor system and an extrapyramidal motor system. All right, make sure you know your autonomic and your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system in general so far. In general, from what I'm looking at.
You said autonomic?
That's your sympathetic and parasympathetic, collectively called my autonomic. What's another name for parasympathetic? What's another name for it? Craniosacral. What's another name for my sympathetic nervous system? Fight or flight and?
Thoracic.
Thoracolumbar. Parasympathetic is craniosacral, sympathetic is thoracolumbar. And onto the eye picture. All right, listen to this. The following is kind of detailed. This final is not that detailed overall, but there's some detailed questions in it. This one is. The following is a list of the steps that occur in the production of an auditory sensation. What is the proper sequence for these steps? So you don't know where I started, you don't know where I ended, but you gotta put auditory sensation in order. Right? I mean,